What's up, Flannelverse? We are back for Week 8 Thursday Night Football. Vikings at Chargers. Should be a fun game tonight. We're breaking it down all angles for DFS Showdown, starting with quarterbacks. We're going position by position. Quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, tight ends, defenses, kickers. Take any questions as we go. Adam, NBA season has started. Are you still fully committed to NFL even with NBA back?
Yeah, it's actually been nice because you know how like when you have a lot of time and you have stuff to do, it just makes that stuff take longer.
Yeah.
I've been a lot more efficient than I expected with football so far. So that's been nice. Like Tuesday, like normally I try and have like first round of projections up Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday evening. And normally that involves like I spend a good part of Tuesday on it and then I like finish on Wednesday. I didn't even look at NFL on Tuesday. I was doing nothing but NBA stuff. And I had first round of projections up by like 11 a.m. yesterday because I just like woke up and did it on Wednesday morning. Wow. I was like, oh, that was a lot more efficient than usual.
You sound like people with kids. They're like, oh, I didn't use my time wisely at all until I kids. Are the projections kind of like your babies, would you say?
Yeah, pretty much. It's like when you're in college. I didn't work when I was in college, but like they would always say that having a job actually made it like easier to be productive with school because you had a set schedule as opposed to having all the time in the world to put off work.
I worked at the gym in college. It did not have that effect on me. I was still a terrible student. That I can see how that would be the case. And like Pete Overzet has talked about that a fair amount. Like since he's had a kid, he's like way more efficient with his time. Like he blocks everything off. And I'm like, man, I could do so much with my life. As somebody who doesn't have kids, like I should be so efficient. And that's just I'm a procrastinator at heart. Difficult to change my stripes. I have like gone through periods through my life where I stopped procrastinating, and like it is actually true. Like during NFL season, I'm so busy that honestly I don't procrastinate that much just because I can't afford to. Like I always have stuff that I need to be doing. So I'm actually like pretty efficient during NFL season. But other than like always having to work, I feel like I'm always just going to procrastinate.
Yeah, I've noticed it with like I kind of tweeted about it, but I've had stuff that I wanted to build for NBA for a while and I just never did. And then the last few days, like I felt like I have like so many more hours in the day, but it's because when I'm not working on NFL, I'm working on NBA instead of like deciding to go take a nap for 3 hours or watch Netflix for 3 hours in the middle of the day. And it's like, oh wow, I had like so much more time.
Yeah, I can't tell you the last time I watched Netflix in the middle of the day. I guess I could. It'd be before an NFL season, almost certainly. Tony, good to see you. Wyatt, good to see you as well. All right, we can get into this slate. We will start with quarterbacks. I have already run some sims here. Quarterbacks, usually, one of the less interesting positions. Sort of interesting how you handle Justin Herbert here, because he isn't like an elite rushing quarterback. But he's rushed for 26.6 yards per game. He had a game where he spiked to 60 rushing yards. Like he's shown a willingness to run at times this year. So you can kind of play it a lot of different ways with Justin Herbert. Treat him like a non-rushing quarterback, or actually like has some spike upside here. So kind of a unique quarterback situation here with Justin Herbert. But ultimately, it looks like I'm getting to a lot, even with projections of 50% flex ownership, 20% captain ownership on Justin Herbert. I got to 61% in the flex, 24% at captain. Did you get a similar number in your run of the Sims, Adam?
Yeah, I'm pretty much in line with how I projected the field, like 58% flex ownership, 15% captain ownership was the projection I used, and I got to 57 and 16. But he came out of the sim as the highest projected player on the slate, and it's just one of those kind of weird slates where, like, obviously from a talent standpoint, you have Justin Jefferson, but he's playing with Carson Wentz as his quarterback, so that's obviously going to limit his projection somewhat. And then you mentioned the rushing upside that Herbert has. Even if you just use his baseline, which mostly is how I'm leaning here, just, like he's projecting him as somebody that will run, and like you expect him to run a bit more than Wentz, for example, but probably not somebody that's going to go out there and, run for 50 plus yards or anything. Even if you just use that, it gives him the highest projection on the slate, and he does have that rushing upside. But you could also make kind of like a bull case argument for him too, where, you and I were kind of talking before the show, if I had a lean on who they were going to activate behind Vidal, but you could see more design runs for Herbert potentially. Like, I don't think that's super likely, or at least like, maybe it's likely that he gets like one more or something. But I doubt that like the game plan is going to be like, oh, we're just going to like run Justin Herbert today. But you could certainly get an extra carry or two by design in addition to what he does, scrambling it and all of that. So there is the potential for a little bit more rushing upside just as a result of them being shorthanded in the backfield.
That's a good one. I had not considered the angle of it would kind of make sense that maybe they do use him a little bit more in the running game potentially. And like you said, like you probably wouldn't project him to have many more carries, but certainly could. And like, especially in the red zone, wouldn't be that surprising if rather than handing it to Kamani Vidal or, one of these third string running backs, they use Herbert there instead. So that is, a little bit of a bonus for Herbert. But regardless, we're getting to a ton. Are you, when you have Herbert in your lineup, in the captain spot rather, or I guess anywhere in your lineup, like, do you typically have him stacked up? And also when you have him at captain, do you have multiple pass catchers or is it often just one?
So looking at the lineups that have him at captain, it's generally looks like multiple pass catchers. And that makes sense. Even, he's somebody, he runs enough that like, it probably doesn't have to be multiple pass catchers, but it makes sense just with the Chargers too. Like they spread things out. There's not necessarily one guy that I'd want to be like jamming into lineups with him. It's not like if Justin Herbert, I mean, not a perfect example because they have Addison, but like if Justin Herbert were the quarterback for the Vikings, then, you'd probably just be seeing some like Herbert plus Jefferson lineups, but there's not like a Justin Jefferson comp in terms of usage, obviously not in terms of talent, on the Chargers. So I would expect, like there's so many good pass catchers on the Chargers anyway that I would expect to have a lot of them. And then, also while he does have rushing upside, Herbert's not somebody that, you probably want tons of at captain without multiple pass catchers. As far as lineups where he's in the flex, same thing. There's just like, I think so many of the best plays on the slate are Chargers pass catchers because there's so many of them that kind of just naturally you're going to get them paired.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, that's kind of my expectation. Also, that most of the time I'm going to have him stacked up with multiple pass catchers when I have him in the captain spot. Just a kind of unique one, just because he does have that upside, but doesn't show it that much as a runner. Carson Wentz, 9,000 projected for 52% flex ownership, 11% captain ownership. I'm getting well under that of Carson Wentz. The price tag is nice. Has not been running a ton this year, and like he's had some rushing upside in the past. He's spiked here and there, but he's also like aging, so I don't know if that's gone or if like he could bring back the rushing at some point. But so far this year, like 14 15 rush yards per game for Carson Wentz. Not much of a runner. Are you getting to a similar number as I am here, a little bit under the field?
I'm a little bit over. I have 58 at flex, 7 at captain, so mostly in line with the field again. But it's not like it's exciting to get to him. But like you said, the price tag is pretty nice at 9K, and you just don't have a lot of high projected guys on the slate. You have a lot of like good options, but you don't really have any runaway plays on the slate. Like I think Herbert in the sim projections, Herbert like 22 fantasy points. Next was Jefferson at 18. So you just have a lot of guys lumped in the like 13 to 18 fantasy point range, including Wentz at 9K, similarly priced to Jordan Mason, for example, 2,800 less than Jefferson, 1,400 less than Herbert. It just looks like a good value. It's not a spot that I'm going crazy above the field or anything. Like, obviously, I'm fine playing a nice chunk of lineups that don't have Carson Wentz. It's not that difficult to imagine a game where you don't need Carson Wentz, considering that, there are so many quality pass catchers on the Chargers. You do have a running back on the Vikings that is going to get the vast majority of the workload. That gives him certainly the ability to beat Carson Wentz. So there are plenty of ways. And then, obviously you have Addison, you have Jefferson, you have Hawkinson. Like there's plenty of ways that Wentz is not in the optimal lineup too. So I don't think this is a spot where, like, there are some slates where it's like, well, nobody projects great, and really it's just like two teams full of shitty skill players, and it's really hard not to play both quarterbacks. I don't think it's that kind of slate, but it's also not the kind of slate where having like a mid-teens projection on a quarterback keeps you from wanting to get to him because there are so many other good plays.
Yeah, I think that's a good breakdown. I always do my article for fantasy points, and I start with like, here are the studs, like the players where it's like, these are the guys that kind of project really well, and then there's kind of a tier break. Oftentimes it'll go all the way down to like the kickers and defenses, and then there's kind of the break there. But like there are some slates where it's like 5 or 6 players that like have really nice projections. This one has 9 players who project for like significant fantasy points. So the quarterbacks look good, but like you're not getting to 90% of a guy like Carson Wentz because there are so many options.
Yeah, I think if I could like just draw up the perfect showdown slate that I would want to play, it's slates like this where like you're not forced into specific builds because like so often on a showdown slate either you get the one where it's like Dolphins Jets or something and there's 3 players in the entire game that you actually want to click on, or you get the ones where it's like Falcons
Chiefs.
Niners and it's just like, oh well, I have to have Robinson, I have to have McCaffrey.
Right.
And you kind of like get forced into these builds where here it's just like you have like what'd you say 9 players where like obviously you'd be surprised if Herbert isn't a top 2 scorer or Jefferson isn't a top 2 scorer, but like there's really you're not going to be shocked if Keenan Allen beats Jefferson or if Wentz beats Herbert or if any of the Chargers
receivers, Kimani Vidal, Jordan Mason. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So there's just like so many solid plays that you can mix and match.
And it's also different from like I always think of like the Chiefs and Bills, where it's also like sort of closer to this in that there are like, there's a lot of different ways it could go, but like there's too many. It's just like I don't feel good about any of the Chiefs receiver. I mean, maybe that's changing now with Rashee Rice back and Xavier Worthy and stuff, but like for years it's been like, oh, a guy will go from 70% route participation one game to like 35% the next game. And it's like there's just no rhyme or reason to it that we can really tell, and I don't know. So it's where it's like so many options.
The Bills and Chiefs to me are more analogous to like the Jets Dolphins, where it's just like like obviously you have Josh Allen who's kind of in that like Robinson McCaffrey category, but like the pass catchers, it's like you're going to click them because somebody's going to do well, but like you're not actually happy clicking any of them.
No,
this slate has so many guys that if this were a main slate, you'd be playing all of these guys.
Yeah, exactly. This is a really strong slate from a like projectable players standpoint, which I agree. I think this is like a pretty fun showdown slate generally. Anything else on quarterbacks? Oh, and Wentz, I assume we are stacking them up, and if we have him at captain, which probably not going to have a ton, but you're going to have multiple pass catchers with him.
Yeah, I can't imagine that I wouldn't want to. Like, you still have 3 obviously very solid ones with Jefferson, Addison, and Hawkinson. You can throw in Naylor. Obviously, you could throw in like backup tight ends or whatever if you wanted.
Yeah.
But yeah, looking at my Wentz captain lineups, not a lot of onslaughts in terms of like 5-1. But a lot of like 3-3, 4-2, where I'm getting multiple pass catchers everywhere, it looks like.
Yeah. I'm just checking now because Marquis bringing up the Vikings going to roll both offensive line and secondary are terrible. But like we have to keep our eye on some injury things with Christian Darrisaw is now questionable, which honestly impacts the Vikings offensive line pretty significantly. Joe Alt also questionable. So I'm not sure who's going to have the better offensive line. It really comes down to who is healthy in this game. But that's a good place to transition to running backs, because obviously Christian Darrisaw pretty impactful for quarterback also, but also the running backs, same thing with Joe Alt. Like that's going to be a pretty big impact who is healthy on the offensive line, which I don't believe we have that news yet. Something we'll be keeping our eye on. At the running back position, so you still have Aaron Jones out. Is that your? I guess that's your lean that Aaron Jones is not going to play this one.
Yeah, I haven't seen that he is, but
he's questionable. Like his 21-day practice window has been open, so I think I think I lean toward he's not going to play, but everywhere else actually has him projected in. So I don't know. Maybe there's at least some chance since his practice window was open. Maybe he comes back and plays some. But I would suspect even if he plays, he's going to be somewhat limited. I guess.
I just assume like we're going to get that news, and I can just adjust then.
True. Let's start with the Charger side. Actually, Kimani Vidal is just 7,000, and with Hassan Haskins out, I think the general assumption here is that Kimani Vidal will take on an even bigger workload than he has in the past. And then both Nyheim Hines and Jared Patterson, I believe, are currently on the practice squad with a shot to be called up. And then, of course, I guess Scott Matlock here also at 200. So as of right now, I don't have a great read on who's going to be the RB2 on the Chargers, but there is going to be some RB2 who is 200. Hopefully they don't call up both of Jared Patterson and Nyheim Hines, because that'll just be a gross situation where they're both kind of good plays who could be zeros. But we'll start with the Kimani Vidal part of this. Vidal 7,000, just too cheap for his role here. How much are you getting to of Vidal?
I only have 19 at flex right now, but that's something that I think might come up. I think you can kind of make two cases. Like you can kind of argue either direction on exactly how to project him. Because on the one hand, like he is somebody that until 3 weeks ago had no role on this team. And so, it's kind of like, are we really going to project him to be like a true bell cow here? But at the same time, that's exactly what we've seen in the games that he's played. The first start that he made, 72% rushing market share. Haskins was at 24%. Herbert barely ran in that game. He was only at 4. So that does inflate those numbers, but it was a 3-1 carry advantage for Vidal versus Haskins. And then last game, 56% rushing market share for Vidal, but that is deflated because Herbert was at 38%. Hines didn't get a carry. So, and Haskins was at 6%. So I think it's likely, the way I have it projected right now is for, I used Hines, but again, obviously it could be Patterson. I just used Hines because he was the active one last week. I gave him 15%. I gave it all 65%. Like that's a pretty healthy amount for him. To put that in context for anybody that hasn't really looked at it, like if you go back and look over the course of a season, it's very unusual for any running back, even the guys at the top, to end up with a more than like 70% rushing market share for their respective team. So projecting 65% is very healthy. Like there's going to be some games where if Herbert runs less, he goes above 70, or if Hines/Patterson just isn't involved, he goes above 70. But I think projecting like 65 to 15 as far as the running backs goes is a pretty healthy projection. It's still only getting me to 19%. So on the one hand, I look at that and I'm just like, okay, I don't think that I'm definitely not like egregiously under projecting him or anything like that in terms of market share. Have him getting the bulk of the receiving work as well. So I think the projection on him is pretty healthy, and I'm still just not getting to him at his ownership. So from that standpoint, I'm okay with it. On the other hand, like clearly, I think it's a good role for him here, and that he's a good play.
I will say also, so the matchup not great against the Vikings, which early on in the season, in terms of like schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed, the Vikings were looking like a huge run funnel. People were just like clamoring to play running backs against the Vikings defense, and it was kind of my take all along that it was like they look much worse than they are because the Vikings offense is just 3 and out every single drive. And as soon as the defense isn't on the field the entire game, they're going to start looking a little bit better, and that seems to be kind of taking shape. They're now the 10th worst matchup in terms of schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed.
It is interesting. They had actually been a run funnel last year too, not in the sense necessarily that they gave up a bunch more production, but in the sense that teams just looked to run on them a lot.
Right. Yeah, we had a conversation about what does it actually mean to be a run funnel, and it is like, and I've since seen that same conversation happen elsewhere. Like, is it what teams try to do against you, or is it like what should teams try to do against you? I think is essentially what the conversation comes down to. Like,
which, like for me, I'm more interested in like what do I think the team is going to do than.
Yeah, and I've always thought that run funnel means like the team gives up more to running backs. So like running backs are more efficient against them, which also like is my assumption then that like maybe it's because that's what the defense has decided to allow more. I don't know, but it's I that was just my assumption, not like I'm trying to make it up. That's just like when I hear run funnel, that's what I think is like the defense is bad against the run. So like theoretically the other team should be able to see that and start running against them. But yeah, we don't need to get into the semantics of what is a run funnel. Regardless, so Vikings defense better against the run over the past 5 weeks. Again, 10th worst matchup for running backs against this Vikings defense. I'm surprised to see that Kamani Vidal. So I got to with a projection of 41% at flex, 15% captain ownership for Vidal, got to 34% in the flex, 5% at captain. He's somebody that I thought I would just get to a ton because he's 7,000 and you're giving him 65% of the work. I mean, it's a hefty workload for a $7,000 running back. I think I'd want more than I'm getting to here. And as we've talked about, like usually you should, if you trust the inputs and like these inputs seem good to me, you should just let the sims tell you what you want rather than trying to tell the sims what you want. But it is risky to like take, a big stand on a player that you think is in a good spot also.
Yeah, and that's like I was saying, that's kind of where I'm at right now, where I'm just looking at it. I'm like, I would like to have more of him, but also I don't think I need to just go project him for every single carry or anything like that. And it does go back to, this is the kind of slate where I think it's kind of just okay to not have a lot of every single player that you like, because you probably like a lot of players.
Good point.
Like if I look at how like the ownership that I used with him getting more ownership than every single one of the Chargers receivers, more ownership than Jordan Mason, more ownership than both of the tight ends. Like if he's going to be the more ownership than Jefferson, like if he's going to be the highest owned player that is not a quarterback, I am fine with just spreading it out across other guys, the wide receivers and all of that.
That's actually a really good point. And also like part of the reason that like I'm like, man, I need to get more of him is because he's the running back as opposed to the receivers. But like, yeah, it's not going to surprise me at all. It would surprise me if he outscores all three of the top receivers for the Chargers. Like I think it's more likely that one of them outscores him, but it's like I don't know which one it's going to be. So I guess I'll just play the running back. So he feels safer because he plays a different position. Like, well, I just know that he's getting the carries. But like what are the actual odds that he outscores all three of them? It's obviously under 50%. So yeah, it probably like it makes sense actually that I'm getting to 34% in the flex, 5% a captain here for Vidal when he is just projected for more of that captain ownership than any of the receivers. So maybe I will just leave it as is.
Yeah. I mean, like I'm really flat on skill players in general here. So I think when I look at my player exposures, and again, this comes with the caveat that you can make obviously very good lineups that have him. You can make very good lineups that don't. Individual players, again, it doesn't really matter. If there's somebody you want, just play them. But when I think about it just from a range of outcomes versus ownership standpoint, I'm not going crazy on like any of these skill guys, but I have more of all of Mason, Jefferson, Allen, Addison, Johnston, and McConkey and Gadsden than I do Vidal, which it's not necessarily like I think these guys are all higher projected plays than him. I don't. But if the field's just going to say, this is the guy that we're going to latch onto and play the most of, I'm going to say, okay, that's the guy that I'm going to play the least of, and I'm just going to have a little bit more of everybody else.
And we do this in NBA all the time where it's like, oh, there's this range of players and they all project within like 3 fantasy points of each other. But the one who's at the top gets projected for, 40% ownership and the other three are like 15% a piece. And then we often make the decision like, I'm just going to play lower of the guy who's getting 40% and then spread it out to the others. I think it's like easier to conceptualize with NBA than NFL because the positions are so distinct in football versus basketball. But it makes sense to do the same thing here where it's like, yeah, I'll just be a little bit lower on Vidal and then give that ownership to other players who are like project about the same and, have a similar range of outcomes, but are just getting lower ownership.
Yeah. It's funny you said that because I was thinking as I was talking that it actually looked like NBA strategy kind of to me.
Yeah.
And it's usually you don't get that in the NFL because players have such distinctly different roles, especially when you're talking a showdown slate. But here it's just like so many players project similarly. It kind of reminds me of, and obviously didn't necessarily go my way, but it kind of reminds me of the running back position on last week's main slate where you had Judkins, you had Hall, and they obviously were the guys that were going to get a ton of ownership. But then behind them, you just had like this whole other range of guys that projected like 1 point worse at a quarter of the ownership or something. It's not that drastic here, but yeah, to your NBA point, there's like the center position for anybody that's familiar with NBA is where you'll really see it a lot, where like you can only play 2 guys and there's going to be 5 or 6 that are all really good plays. And you kind of can just take the ones that everybody else doesn't want and hope that it works out.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting comparison to NBA. All right. Beyond Vidal, we don't know yet who is going to be the RB2 here. We hopefully we'll get some sort of like rumblings from reporters and I don't know if we trust reporters at this point or from the coaches would be even better. Some kind of rumblings about like, oh yeah, Nyheim Hines looking great in practice, or we really trust Jared Patterson or whatever, some indication of what it's going to be. But as of right now, I don't have any read on who the RB2 is behind Vidal. I think it kind of matters though, because they're all $200. So like if they have any workload at all, like Nyheim Hines is going to pop a bit, or Jared Patterson. And then there's a possibility that both get called up from the practice squad is I believe where they are right now. And then there's Scott Matlock. I don't know. What are you doing? What is your plan with the running back 2 position? How much does it depend on whether they call up 1 versus 2 from the practice squad?
So, I mean, it definitely in terms of like how comfortable you can project it, not that it's going to be super comfortable anyway, but if they only call up one, at least you can like assume they're going to be on the field some. If they call up two, then obviously you're just playing a guessing game where I would say to keep in mind that like that would be a spot that has massive volatility in inputs. Like my assumption, if they call them both up, would I guess be that Hines is ahead of Patterson just because, again, he was up last week, but who knows? So that would be a spot where, like, especially in large field tournaments, if you have every site in the industry thinking that Hines is running back too, then just play some Jared Patterson and hope that everybody's wrong, or vice versa. Like, it's a spot where, barring reporting, if we're just guessing, keep in mind that like everybody's guessing. If it's not being reported, then like, you know, the big sites in the industry don't have some inside source. Like they're all just making educated guesses. So do keep that in mind. But for right now, I'm just guessing it's Hines. One thing that I did notice from when I ran my stuff is I think I was a little bit light on Vidal's route participation and a little bit high on Hines. So that is something that probably would bump Vidal up for me at least a little bit when I rerun stuff and pull Hines back down a little bit. But that being said, I'm still getting to, or I was getting to like 34% Hines. Maybe it comes down a little bit once I take some routes away. But at 200, it's just like you assume he's going to be on the field. I have him right now. When I ran stuff, I had him at like 15% carries and 35% route participation. I think I cut the route participation back to like 25%, and then gave, you know, a little bit more to Vidal. But at 200, like, we know he's capable of catching passes. We've seen that in his career. So I think that's a really big thing, is that it's not like he's stone hands and they can't put him out there to catch passes. He can easily get, you know, 1 or 2 points literally just off of receptions.
Yeah, and I mean, on this slate, it seems like the $200 guy who has 1 reception for 4 yards, like, could be the player you need, because we have so many strong like mid-range / pay up options on this slate. So yeah, we'll have to pay attention to what happens there with the practice squad. Obviously, we will have that even before inactives. I think that comes out at 4 Eastern typically, is when you get the practice squad call ups, is the deadline. So we should know who's going to be available. Does the absence of Vidal do anything for you for the fullback Scott Matlock?
Absolutely.
Haskins. Yeah, Haskins.
Not really. I mean, I guess probably should like give him a carry or something. He's more likely to score a touchdown without Haskins than he was with Haskins, I guess, is just factually true.
Yeah. Because they use Haskins like inside the 5 sometimes. Actually, right. I don't know if they have this year, but I know they did last year. Like, he vultured sometimes.
Yeah. So, I mean, they could go to Matlock there, I guess. It makes him look better. It doesn't make him look like somebody that like I want a lot of.
Yeah.
It would be a spot to pay attention to the ownership too. Like, the thing is, like, you assume Hines will catch a pass or two, so like that does matter. But like, if Matlock is going to get no ownership and Hines is going to be, let's say, 15-20%, there is at least some merit in your large field stuff to flipping Hines to Matlock in some lineups.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, we'll. I mean, it's tough to break down the RB2 situation, but if only one of them is active, the halfbacks, so Nyheim Hines or Jared Patterson, like, if one of them is active and the other one is not, they're going to look really strong as the most likely to get the second hand carries there. If they're both active, then yeah, we'll have to play the ownership game. As of right now, just looking around industry projections, different places have it projected very differently, which is why this is kind of a tough one to break down. But I'll have a better idea when I do the show tonight. Again, I'll be about 80 to 85 minutes prior to lock. I will be breaking down this slate again. At that point, we'll have the practice squad calls, we'll have inactives, all of that. So I'll have a little bit more information for you. But it's definitely an important spot to monitor, I would think, with the potential of it just being a 0 anyway.
One thing that I will point out, and you know, obviously Haskins played last week, but Matlock did not run any routes. So I was just looking to say, like, oh, maybe if he just like picked up a handful of routes in like the 4th quarter or something, that would be an indicator that he was going to be utilized in like a pass catching role here. But Hines only ran 1 route, but Matlock didn't run any.
Okay. Jenna says Matlock, a 300-pound bulldozer. Okay. I actually don't know much about Scott Matlock. I was going to have to look into him.
Sounds like a detective from like a
He really,
90
I mean,
season
I think
show.
that's literally a name. Matlock is like
Is
a
it?
detective name, right?
Maybe that's why I was thinking
I think that's like a famous detective. Yeah. Yeah. Um, Tyler says, good call on Knoll on Monday, Neil. I got to say, it worked out a lot better than it could have because I was not aware of the existence of Braxton Berrios, who had not played on the team at all prior to Monday Night Football. Got pretty lucky that Knoll worked out because they ended up running Braxton Berrios like just as many routes as Jalen Knoll. So it worked out, and like the thesis in part, like part of the reason I liked him worked out, but I was expecting like 60 to 70% route participation. I did not anticipate the Braxton Berrios being active. So yeah, worked out for reasons that were not entirely anticipated.
he was still no Dalton Schultz.
What's that?
He was still no Dalton Schultz.
I mean, Dalton Schultz. I played a ton of Dalton. Dalton Schultz is also my favorite tight end on the site. Yeah, Schultz. I think Schultz is like this weekend going to look awesome. Just like no Nico Collins should smash.
Jaden Higgins finally. Maybe.
I mean, it didn't do shit last week. But my best ball bags could really use. I mean, both Higgins and Knoll are like big parts of my best ball bags, and could really use them to start doing stuff.
Pretty sure I have a lot of Schultz. Maybe not.
I think I don't actually think I have a ton of Schultz, which I am regretting right now.
I have a decent amount of Nico, which I'm regretting.
Yeah, I forgot that you pulled them up to the 101 sometimes. RIP.
Yeah. I was screwing. I was going out of my way to get more Brian Thomas, Nico, and Malik Neighbors, and then like and Mike Evans, and foregoing JSN.
Oh no, yeah, that sucks. All right. Running backs, Viking side. So we don't know if Aaron Jones is going to play or not. Currently run the Sims projecting for him out. Obviously, that's information that I will have for the show later on. We'll have inactives. So as of right now, you have Jordan Mason and then Xavier Scott as the backup here. Jordan Mason, like, how much would Aaron Jones affect Jordan Mason's projected workload, do you think?
A pretty good amount, just because like he's another guy that gets projected when Jones is out to get like every carry, not every, but to get the vast majority of carries. 65% projected rushing market share for him, and that's assuming that Scott is in at 21%. Now, granted, like if Jones is in, a lot of Jones's workload just comes from Xavier Scott's projection. But you would expect Jordan Mason's route participation to go down, which obviously that is important. If nothing else, like Aaron Jones, you would expect to cut into that. And then Aaron Jones probably ends up being 35% rushing market share, which would cut Mason back to like 55%. So it certainly hurts, but especially it's one of those where like if Jordan Mason were priced for Aaron Jones to be in, then it wouldn't be that big of a deal because like you still expect Mason to have a big workload, especially in Jones' first game back. But the problem is that you have Jordan Mason priced for Aaron Jones to be out because he's been out for the last however long. So it creates a situation where you would really want to pay attention to ownership, because there is still that path for Jordan Mason to have a big game on a 1-game slate, but you need ownership to really come down to want to go there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, never love players to be priced up for the, assumed absence of their teammate. I kind of wonder, like, so these ownership projections, and this I just looked at RG, it's pretty comparable. 18% flex, 5% captain. Like that would be a smash to me if Aaron Jones is out. I would love these ownership
it'll come up. So I think that's
what I was going to say. Yeah, my assumption is that this is because like ownership projections, I think, are somewhat contingent on like other projections around the industry. And it's like a lot of places have him out and then some places have him in. So then the ownership projection is deflated by that. So yeah, the assumption is that so he looks great if you have him, if the ownership projections reflect Jones being in and the actual projections reflect him being out, then Jordan Mason, I get way above the field, 44% flex, 17% captain. Did you have different inputs when you ran your sims?
Yeah, I ran it with 30% projected at flex and like 8% at captain. And I got to 33 and 12.
Okay. So still above the field.
Yeah, but like that, even like you're saying, that could even come up some if he's out, and every site obviously is projecting him out. But yeah, I was actually thinking before the show started, and it didn't dawn on me where it was coming from, that the EV projections for my lineups were just higher than we normally get in our sim. Like a lot of like 150%, 200% type stuff, which generally when you see that, and obviously it depends on what product you use. Like there's a lot of products out there that it's default for it to be telling you that your lineups are 200, 300%. But ours usually, like you'll get a few, you'll get some over 100, but you'll get like a lot of lineups that are just in that like 50 to 100% range. So it stood out that like either ownership was off somewhere or a projection was off market somewhere, but it probably a lot has to do with the running back 2 situation for both teams.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, well, I mean, a lot of this is like tough to break down because we just don't know at this point. But Jordan Mason, gonna look, it's all gonna be ownership dependent, and I think ownership is just not trustworthy right now. But it's like it's a pretty strong matchup with the Chargers. So I guess we can break down that part of it over the past 5 weeks. Running backs against the Chargers, it is I believe the 12th best spot for running backs. Yeah.
5th best spot on the ground.
Oh, is that right? Hang on, I just clicked out of it. Yeah, 5th best spot, which is even better for Jordan Mason. That's a good shout out there. Was talking about it with Debro, was saying like he thinks that this is a great spot for Jordan Mason because they allow a lot of explosive runs, a lot of yards before contact, and like kind of those mesh well with Jordan Mason. Jordan Mason's skill set. He has a lot of explosive runs in him, so it sets up as a seemingly pretty good matchup for Jordan Mason on the ground here. So yeah, we'll have to pay attention to ownership, but in general, like in a vacuum, I would like to play a lot of Jordan Mason.
Yeah, right now, like I said, I haven't mixed in just with that whole group of like wide receivers in the like 30 to 40% range. And Marquee Sports mentioned it in chat too. Not only is Aaron Jones questionable, Xavier Scott's questionable. So there is some potential that this turns into like Cam Akers elevated from the practice squad as RB2 or something.
I did not even realize that Xavier Scott is questionable. That is a good note. Yeah, so we'll have a lot more information later. What is Cam Akers' price? Is he 200?
I have no idea.
I would assume he's 200, but yeah, currently actually I can go to the inputs page.
I don't know if he's on there.
Okay, right. If you don't have projections not on there, okay. Well, my assumption is that he's 200, and so he would also be in that mix of the potential 200 running backs that we'd have to consider.
He's 1,000.
Oh, he's 1,000. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Anything else on? I guess you don't have CJ Ham with a projection either. Looks like.
No.
Or at least didn't get to any CJ Ham.
CJ Ham's out.
Oh yes. Okay. All right. Anything else at running back?
No.
All right, let's move on to wide receivers. There are a lot of them here. Viking side, a little bit easier. So we have Jordan Addison back. Justin Jefferson is 11,800, Addison 7,400, Naylor 3,600, and then Thielen kind of an afterthought since Jordan Addison returned. Jefferson at 11,800, projected for 37% flex ownership, 17% captain ownership. I got to 35% flex, 16% captain. So just a little bit under the field there on Jefferson. How much did you get of Jefferson, and what are you doing with him?
Yeah, I have 37 flex, 16 captain. The captain ownership I used was only like 8 or 9% though. So that actually has me above the field on him at captain and then right around the field at flex. The negative obviously is that Carson Wentz is his quarterback, although I don't know if that's a negative compared to JJ McCarthy or not. But it is, a negative compared to like Kirk Cousins.
Right.
But Jefferson still obviously really, really good, essentially matchup proof as far as his skill set goes. Just a matter of, can Wentz get him the ball? But you also, don't have like a true alpha receiver on the Chargers either for him to compete with. So it goes back to what I was saying earlier. He's still the second highest projected guy on the slate. I do think that there's a decent gap between him and Justin Herbert in terms of fantasy points, but he clearly, as far as skill players goes, is the highest projected guy and certainly can beat Justin Herbert as well.
Right. Jordan Addison only 7,400, 25 targets in 3 games so far with Carson Wentz. Looks really good. Projected for 31% flex ownership, 4% captain ownership. I got a little bit under in the flex at 26%, and then a little over at captain with 7%. Jordan Addison, how much did you get to of Jordan Addison?
I have a lot at captain right now. I have 31 at flex, which is about even, but I have 21 at captain, and
damn,
I think it's probably just the price tag and what it opens up. I haven't actually looked, but I'm looking now just to see like what the Jordan Addison captain lineups look like, and it lets me get to Herbert, it lets me get to Jefferson, and then I can mix and match what I want, whether that's a good amount of Carson Wentz, it looks like, mixing in some defenses, mixing in some kickers, mixing in, other wide receivers, Keenan Allen, Quentin Johnston. It just makes it so I think I can make some really highly projected lineups that have a relatively low owned captain. And then one other thing that I think is nice too, kind of going back to what we were talking about with there just being so many good plays on this slate, sometimes you have to be really careful with thinking that like you're making relatively unique lineups because you're playing, a 2, 3, 4% owned captain, but like it actually ends up being duped a lot because there's only a handful of lineups that you realistically would play with that guy at captain. That's not the case with Jordan Addison. Like you can make so many different Jordan Addison captain lineups, and he's on the field a ton. And that's something that, has really stood out. He came back from his suspension and had like a 96% route participation. Then he was at 76%, but that's the week that he got hurt and he left early, so that doesn't really count. Or it was the week that he was suspended the first quarter. Maybe both. I don't remember what exactly happened.
Oh, it was in London, yeah, and they just held him out with the first quarter because like he had done stayed out at night or something. Yeah.
So that's what it was. It wasn't injury. It was the first quarter thing. Then they had the bye week, and then he was 98% last week. So he's out there running routes at like the same frequency as Justin Jefferson, essentially. Clearly, you're not expecting him to draw targets at the same rate, but he's at like 0.2 or 0.21 targets per route run since coming back. Obviously, all of those games with Carson Wentz. So again, not that you're saying like he's the same skill set or anything as Jefferson, but he's running routes at a similar rate. He's not getting targeted that much less frequently either. Jefferson's at, I think, like 0.24 or 0.25 in those games. So I think Addison just looks really good.
Yeah, agreed. Addison, and I think his skill has been underrated his entire NFL career, which I'm a homer. We don't really need to get into it, but I think people don't realize how good Jordan Addison actually is because he plays with Justin Jefferson. I think he would be the wide receiver one on many, many teams. Jalen Naylor, 3,600, a little bit more involved than I would have guessed since Addison came back. Naylor has 12 targets in the past 3 games with Addison back again. I guess Addison did miss one quarter there, but generally I've been kind of surprised with the Jalen Naylor usage, projected for 12% flex, 0% captain ownership. I only got to 2% in the flex, none at captain with those projections. What do you get to of Jalen Naylor?
Yeah, I have 11% flex. I don't have him at captain. So it puts me a little over the field where I projected him in flex, but we have seen him, significantly ahead of Adam Thielen in terms of wide receiver 3 routes. He's running like 65%, give or take, route participation. Thielen at, like 20-25%. So since Addison returned, 59% in the first game. That's the one where Addison ran 96%, 66% in the game where Addison ran 76%. And then last game, 62%, Addison ran 98. Thielen dropped all the way down to 13% in that one. So we have seen Naylor as the clear wide receiver 3 here. And he's going to be third, or you expect him to be third amongst wide receivers in targets per route run. You expect him to be fourth amongst pass catchers behind Hawkinson as well. But Jefferson's not dominating targets to the extent where, if Jefferson were out there getting targets most players with his skill set do, up at 0.28, 0.29, 0.3, and then Addison and Hawkinson were both at 0.2 like they are, you'd have Naylor coming in at 0.1, 0.11, something like that. But because Jefferson's only at 0.24, 0.25 in that range, it still allows Naylor to be at 0.14 to 0.16 targets per route run and be viable when you're running 65% of dropbacks.
And they use him in the red zone. I've been sort of shocked sometimes as there was a period last week where it was it's 2nd and 1 on the 2-yard line, and they decided to throw it multiple times instead of going to Jordan Mason. Maybe it was on the 6-yard line or something. Super frustrating for me as somebody who has a lot of Jordan Mason in best ball. But they kept throwing it to Jalen Naylor. Actually, maybe it's just once to Jalen Naylor in that game, but there was another, I forget which, might have been the London game, that they targeted him 3 consecutive times in the end zone on when it was on the 1-yard line. They just seem to love Jalen Naylor in the red zone for some reason.
So he's locked into that. Every NFL coach, just they get inside the 3 and their brain just turns off and they're like, what's what can I do that makes me look the smartest if it works? Jalen Naylor is locked into this makes no sense, but we're going to do it roll.
He has 4 end zone targets over the past 3 games. So yeah, insane. Leading the team, 1 each for Hawkinson, Addison, Jefferson, and then none for anybody else. Just bizarre. Maybe,
Jones in.
oh, Aaron Jones in. Okay. So that will cut into Jordan Mason a little bit, but also will keep Jordan Mason's ownership down. And I think Jordan Mason still has the same upside. My guess is that this actually makes me like Mason better ultimately, because I think he's gonna the ownership's gonna come down and he's still gonna look good.
My
It's good
guess
to know
is
though.
it does not for me.
Okay, you think that just like it's gonna cut into his projection enough that you're not gonna want him?
Yeah, because there's going to be so many guys. There's already so many guys that projected similarly to him
True.
and are cheaper. Um, it's just, I mean, you have McConkey, you have Vidal, you have Allen, you have Addison, you have Johnston, and that's without even getting to like the tight ends, kickers, defenses.
Yeah. All right. Well, we can move on to the Chargers wide receivers, but before we do that, Adam, I need to ask, why did you tell me to draft Ty Felton in best ball?
Because I mean, he's at like 0.5 targets per route run.
Okay. All right. So you think he's just yet to break out?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's
Ty Felton, the time is coming.
It's just your team is incompetent. You have Jackson Smith and Jigba just on the bench,
Just
not
waiting.
running up.
That's right. Okay. All right. Fair enough. On the Charger side, we have, of course, the big 3: Keenan Allen, QJ, Lad McConkey, and then Trey Harris. Getting some positive coach speak. My best ball backs could use him too, by the way, but he's 3,000. Might be tough to get there, but we can start with the big 3: Keenan Allen, Quentin Johnston, Lad McConkey. Keenan projected for 32% flex, 6% captain. QJ 20% flex, 1% captain. McConkey 39% flex, 11% captain. Interesting that the ownership projection on QJ is so much lower than Keenan Allen and Lad McConkey after his hot start. The result of this, though, is that we would get to a ton of QJ. I think all of this is going to be super ownership dependent, like what the Sims give you as far as these 3 receivers go. Did you use similar ownership numbers, and what are you getting to of these 3?
Yeah, I think you can kind of talk about the Chargers receivers as like their own little version of what we were talking about earlier with all those mid-range guys, where you can have your preferences between Allen, McConkey, Johnston, and I think you can make reasonable cases for any of them to be the one that like you want. But realistically, I think if there's ownership discrepancies, the best approach is probably to just try and kind of do the opposite. Specifically, I think between Quentin Johnston and Lad McConkey, because I think Keenan Allen is just like really locked into being the highest target per route run guy on this team. He's running less routes than Johnston. He's running less routes than McConkey, but he's far and away getting the most targets when he's on the field. 0.28 targets per route run this season. McConkey's at 0.21. Gadsden's at 0.2. Johnston's at 0.19. So I just like, I really like Keenan Allen, but then between the other two, I think there's just a lot of volatility there where McConkey's target per route run has come up, but part of that was because of the game that Quentin Johnston was out. But you are seeing things kind of start to stabilize where for a while this year, it was like Quentin Johnston's getting more targets and he's catching them and, making just big play after big play. And you are seeing things kind of stabilize where it's just balancing out between them. If Johnston is going to project to be the lowest owned by far of the 3, I'm going to want to play him. And right now, I would have 32% at flex. I'd also have 12% at captain, compared to 24% McConkey at flex, 2% at captain, and then 35 and 9 for Allen. So, like, I kind of think no matter what, I want Allen, but the projections on all 3 of these guys are just so similar. Keenan Allen came in at 14.5, Johnston at 13.8, McConkey at 13.2 when I ran the sim before the show. I think Allen is the preferred of the 3, but like all 3 of them are just so similar. And in a 1-game sample, obviously any of them can win out. So like I would say that my preferred order is like Allen, Johnston, McConkey, but ownership certainly is going to dictate what I want to do with these guys.
Yeah. I'm looking at the matchups here just because it's interesting. I had been told that maybe Keenan Allen is the one to target here. I'm not sure. Looking at the schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed, it's a really tough matchup for slot receivers, which would be Keenan Allen and Lad McConkey. Both run a fair amount in the slot, and actually a really positive matchup for receivers out wide, which is where QJ runs his route. So from a schedule adjusted fantasy point, it looks like a better matchup for QJ than the receivers who run a bit more in the slot, and you can look at the slot rates here. I mean, it's Keenan Allen 59% out wide, 41% from the slot. Lad McConkey 64% from the slot, 34% out wide, and then QJ 85% out wide, just 15% in the slot. So from a like schedule adjusted standpoint, it looks like it's a better matchup for the other receiver, or for QJ, than the others. In terms of the coverage grades, the schematic matchup, it is not really great for anybody, but especially bad for QJ in the types of coverages that the Vikings run. So I don't know, a lot of different ways to kind of look at this. I do think that ultimately it is going to come down to ownership, like you said. So we'll keep an eye on what the ownership ends up at. I'd be a little bit surprised if QJ ends up this much lower than the others, but maybe not. I guess we do only remember like, what have you done for me lately? I still think of QJ as being like the one that people are excited to play, but I guess we've had a few weeks now where he's been kind of a dud, so maybe people have forgotten the beginning of the season.
Yeah, and he was out. And I mean, like, I'm looking at another very popular site right now that has QJ almost 3 points behind both McConkey and Allen. Like, if that's how he's going to be projected in the industry, he's going to be lower owned. Emwald said, can you repeat the ownerships that you used for the 3 for the Sims run? Yeah, and it did exactly what in my head I would want to do. So I had Allen 34% at flex, McConkey 32, Johnston 21 as far as the projection goes. And I ended up with Allen like 34, 35. So pretty much in line with the field at flex. And then I ended up with 32 Johnston and 24 McConkey. So basically McConkey at Johnston's ownership and Johnston at McConkey's at flex. And then pretty similar at captain too. Like I was even with the field on Allen. And then I pretty much played Johnston at the rate that the field is projected to play McConkey. And I played McConkey at the rate the field was projected to play Johnston.
Yeah, makes sense. Did you get to any Trey Harris? I've not looked at what's his actual route participation, man. Let's look at the route share report here. Do I have
35, 40?
Okay.
In my numbers, so probably like 30 in yours.
Okay. Yeah, let's see. What does fantasy points have? The progression here. So we had QJ out in week 6, Trey Harris up. Man, he was up at 85%. I didn't realize he was at 85% route participation that game, but that's obviously just with QJ out, back to 34%. So did retain some of that work in week 7 with QJ returning. A lot of positive coach speak, which I guess Harbaugh really obviously is a very positive guy, says a lot of nice things about his players, but it has made it sound like, he's learning a lot. He's looking great out there. I kind of got the impression that he wants to continue to give him run, but I don't know that I can actually expect him to run more than 34% while the other 3 are all healthy. Like, how do you not play those 3?
Right.
So as long as they're healthy, I don't think we see a bump here.
Yeah, I mean that's the issue to me is like, where would his routes come from? Like, you do have Quentin Johnston running 90+% route participation. Maybe like if you see Quentin Johnston come back to like start making the mistakes that he's made in the past, then yeah, maybe you see Quentin Johnston get down to like 75% and Trey Harris jump to 55, but we haven't seen that yet. So I think at this point it's probably like, yeah, he's going to run 35 to 40% because we're happy with what we're seeing. If we weren't happy with what we're seeing, it would be less.
Right. And I do think that he probably has like multiple outs to contingent upside. Like if any of the big 3 gets hurt, he probably steps in. So I guess there's that positive for Trey Harris. I think he's like a fine play at 3,000 and virtually no ownership. You've got him projected for just 1% flex ownership. I got to 4%. That seems good to me. I'd like to be above the field if he's only getting 1% ownership, but not like a heavy part of my portfolio since he is 3,000. How much are you getting to Trey Harris?
Yeah, I got to 3% too. And to your point on contingent upside, I do think it's there, like you said, because like if Quentin Johnston were to get hurt or something, clearly we saw the massive bump in routes when Johnston was out. But you would expect the same for anybody else, because like if McConkey gets hurt, you're just gonna have Allen run like all of his routes in the slot and Trey Harris jump in on the outside, or vice versa. McConkey already running most of his routes in the slot, but he would take probably the Keenan Allen routes as well, and then you would have Trey Harris next up.
So there's like, beneficial in that there are multiple outs there to more contingent upside.
Said, I don't see a world where Lad is higher owned than QJ. People love Lad. Like, Lad's been high owned all year, even though he has been the wide receiver 3 for most of it.
He was a 2nd round best ball pick. I think it's tough to like wipe that from your mind that he's just like, that is his value.
It's the combination of everybody's high on Lad, like just historically, and they're low on QJ. So
Right.
it's like
Historically, yeah.
everybody's priors are like Lad through the roof, QJ through the floor.
Right.
And I mean, it's been tough. Like I've talked about it on shows with you where I've like actively looked for ways to like make Lad project better and QJ to project worse. And it's like, okay, unless I'm going to just make shit up, it's not there.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, priors have changed somewhat this year. And you know, a lot of people do overreact also in fantasy football. So like some people are like, all right, it's just QJ's team now after the first couple weeks. And now it's like, we've kind of reached an equilibrium here where it's like QJ hasn't been as good recently. The others have been better. So it's, I don't know.
I was kind of thinking about it the other day. I don't know if it was a Chargers primetime game or if it was just, I happened to be thinking about it, but it's the kind of spot where like in 2018, I would probably just like be slamming Ladd McConkey every week because he'd be like 3% owned because people would just be like looking at game logs and Quentin Johnston would be, 20%. And I would just be playing Ladd McConkey every week saying like Ladd McConkey's going to have good games eventually. But then because people have like advanced so much, now it's like, okay, I'm just jamming Quentin Johnston every week because the field is saying, well, I know Ladd McConkey's going to be good eventually. And they're just ignoring the guy that has been good every week.
Right. Yeah, that is true. It's changed quite a bit. Are you getting to any Keandre Lambert Smith? He didn't run any routes.
I don't know
last
that
week.
I even projected him to be active.
Okay. All right. Anybody else we need to talk about at wide receiver?
No.
Darius
If Lambert
Davis.
Smith is active, then he's your like maybe gets one deep target guy.
Yeah. Darius Davis 200. Looks like you have him projected to be active. Let's see. Has he been running routes?
Like 5%.
Yeah, 3% last game at fantasy points. Yeah, so not. You can hope for a touchdown or something, but probably not the guy you need.
He might get like a carry.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to tight ends. Is Oronde Gadsden the real deal? He's 5,800. We do get Tyler Conklin back for this game, but I don't know what his role is going to be. I don't know if you have any kind of read on this, but Oronde Gadsden up to 79% route participation in that last game, and he's been crushing. So like, I assume I think everybody is projecting this as though it's like Oronde Gadsden is just the very clear tight end one now. That seems pretty likely that he is just a clear tight end one now, but how are you projecting Gadsden? How much are you getting to?
Yeah, I'm projecting him as the tight end one now because that seems like what they're doing. The
Yeah.
thing that really stood out to me last week was, so we had 3 weeks ago was kind of like the first week that Gadsden eclipsed 60% route participation in the PFF numbers. But that was the final week that Will Dissly was out. And then in week 6, you had Dissly come back and run like 20% of routes. You had Gadsden run like 77%. So it was like, okay, is Gadsden just now the guy, or was Dissly limited and they're going to end up splitting things in week 7? Dissly didn't even keep his 20%. He ran like 2%, and Gadsden got up to nearly 80. He smashed. I'm not projecting 80 here, but I do think 70 to 75 makes a ton of sense because we've seen him do it, and he's also been playing really well. So I think he's going to run a lot of routes and probably be targeted a pretty good amount because he's been fine at drawing targets. I think he looks good.
Yeah, I mean the role has been pretty awesome for Gadsden, increasing each week, and then of course last week just had a huge breakout. He is 5,800. So we have him projecting here for 32% flex, 4% captain. So I was under the field in both those spots, 28% flex, 1% captain. What numbers did you use for the projected ownership, and how much did you get in your run of the Sims?
Had him projected for only like 25% at flex and 3 or 4 at captain. I got to 42 at flex, 2 at captain. So wasn't using him a lot at captain, but was pretty well over the field at flex.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I got under the field here in my run. It is one of those where it's like we didn't in the last game. So as you noted, he took on the bigger workload as Will Dissly lost his, but now we get Tyler Conklin back. Tyler Conklin, he was hurt in week 7, right? Wasn't he inactive?
Yeah, but he was benched in week 6.
So he was healthy in week 6 and just benched. Okay.
I don't remember for sure if he was hurt last week, but week 6 was big. Yeah, so week 6 was like with Disley back, you had no idea what they were going to do with, the Conklin, Disley, Gadsden. Is Gadsden going to just disappear? And they were like, no, like they didn't play Conklin. And then last week they also didn't play Disley. So the combination of that makes me think that it's just Gadsden's job now.
Yeah, no, I think that is a reasonable assumption. I was thinking that maybe Conklin got hurt in week 6, and that's why he, stopped playing. But if he didn't get hurt, then I don't know. Maybe it is just clearly Gadsden by a million here. Are you getting to any of Conklin or Disley?
No.
Okay. And then on the Viking side, TJ Hawkinson, 4,800 projected for 31% flex ownership, 2% captain ownership. I only got to 3.3% at flex, none at captain using those numbers. He's one of the best like point per dollar values on the slate. The role has actually been pretty strong, even with Jordan Addison back, which has been kind of a surprise to me. But I'm not getting to much here. How much are you getting to of TJ Hawkinson?
More than you, less than the field. I have like 15% right now. 30% projected ownership. I have 15. Certainly would like to get more, like wouldn't be upset if I got more. I think he's, again, just kind of a casualty of like, there's a lot of guys that I want to play. But to your point, he's another one I talked about with Naylor, but the fact that Jefferson's not dominating targets to the extent that top end wide receivers often do does leave like 0.2 targets per route run for TJ Hawkinson. There was, people brought it up when Wentz initially took over for McCarthy that historically he likes throwing to his tight ends. We've seen, again, him target Hawkinson at a pretty high rate. So I do think Hawkinson looks good. I think that that one spot that will end up kind of dictating how much of him I play is exactly where Gadsden's ownership ends up coming in. I think there's a pretty good chance that Gadsden ends up getting steamed between now and lock. And if he does, that to some extent probably cuts into Hawkinson's ownership, which would then make me want to play a bit more Hawkinson. But right now, with the assumption that Hawkinson, the assumption that I used, that Hawkinson is like 1.5 times as popular as Gadsden, I'm just playing more Gadsden than Hawkinson.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. The role, man, I really thought Hawkinson was going to lose the role, but just under, 6.7 targets per game with Addison back. Kind of nuts there. Are you getting to any Josh Oliver? Four targets since Addison came back in 3 games.
I don't have him. I think that he's viable, but again, it's I think there's 2 things that are keeping me from getting to like him or Disley or, these guys that could score a touchdown. It's one, the assumption that there's going to be a $200 running back for the Chargers that is playable. And 2, that it's not like a stars and scrubs slate in the sense that there's a bunch of expensive guys that I have to jam in. And there's a very, very strong mid-range where you could easily have, just like blow up games from multiple guys that cost $7,500.
Yeah. Any other notes on tight ends?
No.
All right. Defenses, using projections of 14% projected ownership on both defenses, 1% at captain on both defenses. I got a bit under the field, 11% on the Chargers, 12% on the Vikings. How much do you get to of the defenses?
I got to 10% on the Chargers, 25 on the Vikings, which on the one hand, like that's a lot of Vikings, but on the other hand, both of these offenses, even though they have players that I want to play, like they're both offenses that, are not like the Jets, for example, where you're going in just saying like, I don't know how these guys move the ball. They are both certainly capable of looking bad. On the Viking side, it's Carson Wentz is capable of playing like Carson Wentz. On the Chargers side, you've mentioned Joe Alt being questionable a couple of times. He certainly matters a lot. But this is a team that they just can't stay healthy on the offensive line. And you do have the potential to just get a ton of pressure on Justin Herbert and rack up sacks, potentially get fumbles, get, balls chucked up into coverage. Like there is upside here for the Vikings. It's just a very volatile spot where like they could get torched because the Chargers have Justin Herbert and a bunch of good receivers. But you are also talking about, a team that is missing running backs and offensive linemen. Like there is the potential for the Justin Herbert just kind of gets killed through no fault of his own game.
That's especially if Joe Alt is out, then we're going to have to really consider the Vikings defense because they have a really strong defense. But yeah, I think both are strong enough. I might want to end up with higher than these numbers, but it kind of a lot depends on Joe Alt and Christian Darrisaw for me. So we'll have to monitor the offensive line situations. As far as the kickers, okay, finally I'm not getting to 70% kickers in my first run of the Sims. Dicker projected for 21% and 1% of captain. Reichard 25 and 1% of captain. I only got to 13%. Dicker 6%. Will Reichard, how much do you get to?
I got 18 Dicker, 13 Reichard, and I was very happy to see that finally I have things in a place where one kicker is not just being jammed into every lineup.
Yeah, this looks a little bit better. Oh, this is pretty low on kickers, which maybe also comes down to like the really strong mid range on this slate, where probably somebody outscores the kickers.
Yeah, this is a slate where I would just kind of expect to probably not get as much kickers as usual.
Yep. Will Gadsden
like obviously if you wanted, I had 35% combined defenses and then 32 kickers. If you told me you wanted to mix in more kickers, less defenses, like obviously,
yeah,
fine.
it's all viable. Yeah. Matt Young asks, will Gadsden get stuck blocking Vikings blitz? I don't think so. I don't think that's like what they use him for. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know. He's been so strong as a pass catcher, I'd be kind of surprised.
I assume that if that ends up being an issue, they just like get more like Fisk out there or somebody else.
Choke Hold'em had a dream that he won the Millie Maker, and then it was cut down to like 300,000 or something. But yeah, hopefully your dream comes true and you split with me for 300,000 something tonight. Any other notes on this game, Adam?
I think Matt Young is giving Carson Wentz a little bit too much credit. He said Wentz equals sacks, Herbert equals interceptions. Wentz potentially equals running backwards, getting spun around, right, fumbling in the wrong direction. Like, yeah, Wentz can do some really stupid shit.
He really can. It's kind of impressive how dumb the stuff he can do. Who was it that ran back and got tackled almost in the end zone? I think it was just on Monday night, right? One of the Monday night quarterbacks, and then it was somehow not a safety. Do you remember that?
Yeah,
it just looked like a Carson Wentz play to me.
I don't remember who it was. I mean, I immediately, when this conversation started, just thought back to Kirk Cousins taking a knee when he meant to spike it, like
yeah,
6 years ago or whatever, 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's funny. Oh, CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud got tackled. It looked like a safety to me. I did not understand. Apparently, I don't know the rules surrounding safety because it looked like a safety to me. Anyway, any other notes on this slate, Adam?
No. Pay a lot of attention to ownership. I think even more so than like usual, because there are so many similar plays on this slate. Like ownership's just going to drive more. Whereas a lot of slates, it's just like, kind of don't care how popular Christian McCaffrey is. I still need to play Christian McCaffrey. Like ownership, I think actually drives a lot on this slate.
Yeah, I think that's good. Good note. Ownership and like whatever news we get, we're going to get.
I use Christian McCaffrey. Like I didn't only play 40% and get buried last week, but
that was dumb. Come on, Adam. Yeah, I only had 3 takes on that slate and it went really well. I was like, just jam Christian McCaffrey and Bijan Robinson and Kyle Pitts, and that worked out. Pretty well. Just jamming those 3. But like that was such a tough slate from I really like those 3, and then everybody else, like there's like literally 0 value. So I guess, right. And then I was like, I guess kickers and defenses, since there's no value, but like I had no great take. I was like wrong on which kickers and defenses. Yeah, I don't know. That was a weird one. Anyway, we're gonna get out of here. Adam, anything else that you want to shout out? Do you have NBA stuff coming out today? Anything else?
No.
Okay. Again, I will be back 80 to 85 minutes prior to lock to break down this game once again with more information than we have right now, updated ownership projections, all that. If you haven't already done so, please do like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel, trying to get to 6,000 subscribers by the end of the NFL season. And if you haven't signed up at Run the Sims, you really should. You can use promo code Neil to get 10% off your first payment on any of their products. We did get a question here. Emerald says, Adam, will you be doing a main slate NFL show this week? Have you figured that out yet?
I don't know. It's kind of it ends up being really dependent on like how much stuff I've gotten done, how much more I need to do before lock.
Okay, so that's a maybe. Promo code Neil to get 10% off your first payment on any Run the Sims product. All right, I'll see you guys later. See you tonight.